Welcome to Eventual Millionaire. I'm Jamie Masters, and today on the show we have Laura Novak Meyer. She runs LittleNestPhoto.com, which is actually a franchised photography business. I'm so excited to dive in. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. So excited to be here. We had so much fun already. I can't wait to see how it continues.
Me too. We're all giggling and laughing and starting late. It's great. Well, it's funny because somebody emailed me and was like, "Oh, Laura would be perfect for your show," because on one of the episodes I said I was too nice. And so they emailed me and they're like, "Oh, Laura would be perfect because she was told she was too nice also."
Yes.
So before
Yeah.
we get into the niceness, which I'm sure we will connect on, tell us about your business and how you've grown it to be a huge company. Because normally, no offense to photographers out there, they're usually, just a one person sort of shop, but you've grown it into
Yeah.
something huge.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a great pivot into our conversation because when you're looking at the photography industry as a whole, it's very much a cottage industry. And so we saw that as an opportunity. A lot of photographers see the industry as very oversaturated, but we said, okay, well, what happens if you take what we know about the photography industry and then also what we know about retail and then merge them together? So I really look at our concept as the photography is the end product, but it's a service retail business. And so with that, I was in the photography industry for about 10 years as an independent photographer. And then I got into franchising kind of by accident. Um,
How
so
does that
people,
happen? People don't, oh, whoops,
yeah,
franchise.
exactly. Like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I'm franchising. But so what happened is that I had really reached the top of my market in the Philadelphia area, had gotten to know the industry. I was teaching and speaking around the country on the business of photography and became pretty versed in what it really took to run a solid photography business. At the same time, and it was very upscale, I was photographing celebrities and traveling around the country. And this was around 2009. And a couple of things happened. The first is that some of my very high end customers said, I love you, Laura, but not this year. I'm about half of my net worth as I was 6 months ago.
Ouch.
And the other thing that happened is I started thinking about having a family. And I thought, you know what? If I take a maternity leave, I am 25% down for that year. And I was generating like $1 million just with a camera in my hands. And so I didn't really like the idea that if I didn't have a camera in my hands, I wasn't making money. I think that is one of the kind of inherent flaws in the photography um, industry is that you're selling your time for a living and typically for not as much money as like maybe an attorney that charges $500 an hour. And so you're really limited even at a high price point as to how much you can grow. So I thought, I have a great idea. I'm going to go into retail in 2009 in the midst of a recession. I had no idea what I was doing. I signed a terrible lease. I did everything wrong that you could possibly go wrong in that construction process. And somehow we survived. And not only survived, but did really well with this idea of combining upscale photography and that boutique feel of what it feels like to get a personalized photography service with retail best practices, and made it in kind of the upper, made it fairly accessible, both in terms of convenience and in price. And it just blew up. The customer demand really was there because at the price point that we were at, there really wasn't that many options. So this is for people who want the convenience and the accessibility of a kind of chain operation, but really wouldn't be caught dead at picture people. So that's where we saw that great opportunity, and so it was just very exciting for us to see what that possibility could be. Somebody came to us and said, you should open a second location. And we were like, okay, we should open a second location, see if we can do it again. And we did it again about 45 minutes away.
That's
So
insane.
that's when we knew that the concept was franchisable. I was approached by some people in other markets saying, we'd love to bring this idea to our areas. And how should we do that? Can you give me a workshop? And I'm like, not really. This is a pretty extensive training process. But the more research I did on it, the more I fell in love with the idea of franchising. So that's what we did. So now we have 4 open. So one of our company-owned locations I sold, and so that has become a franchise. And then the other one I still own, and then we have 2 other franchises open and 5 more under construction. So we'll have 9 open by the end of the year.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
going all in.
So
What's
that's
insane?
about 15 years and 10 minutes.
I love that. Short and concise. Now I have 1,000 questions. Perfect. So it's funny because you said I started this in 2009, and it's always amazing to sort of hear the journey from that many years in this short period of a time, because you sort of go over that and somehow it all worked, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think it worked during that period? Because most people would think that it was a dumb move to go ahead and open something at that point. Was it just the mergence between the, standard what you could get and this boutique side that really made the difference? Do you really think that's the one reason why you succeeded when other people failed?
I think so. I mean, it probably was a dumb move, but I think what worked is that I had a very, very clear vision. And when I say we, there's team members who are still part of the organization that started with us at that time. And they very much contributed to that vision. And we had a very strong vision for not only, and we were very clear on what our differentiators were. So we knew that outstanding photography needed to be a differentiator, but one of the other differentiators is a full service experience. So whereas a lot of photographers are just, photographing, not doing very much with the files, putting them on a disc, whereas I think sometimes the customer feels like that's what they want, they really don't. It doesn't create an end product that is satisfactory. So having that full service experience where you walk in and you get interior design help and you can see vignettes and it feels like you're in a home furnishing store, that highly differentiates us. And then just this incredible guest experience, like you feel you're at the Four Seasons, is another one of our differentiators. So I think the fact that we were so clear on our uniques, we were so clear on our core values, we were so clear on the vision, that kind of helped us get over those natural bumps in the road that every entrepreneur faces when they start out on a crazy endeavor. I mean, the statistics are stacked against us, particularly as women, right? Like I'm part of what the 1.5% of women have grown their businesses to over $1 million value. So there has to be something bigger than an implementation plan to get you there, I think, or else
So
you're just going to get discouraged.
why do you think it's an issue over, because I don't get a lot of women on this show, so I have to ask this, because
Yes.
all the women that listen are like, get more women. I'm like, I am trying.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think is the difference, right? Why is it that so many women can't hit to over 1 million?
I think, there was an article that was written about me on LinkedIn that like blew up kind of by accident about this topic. And the comments were fascinating
Ooh.
because I think it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, it's support system. There isn't a lot of support systems for women who are looking to go big. And when I've walked into the support systems that are designed for people like me, they felt very masculine to me and I didn't feel at home. In fact, I got kicked out of one because I was pregnant. So, that's not going to work. And I think so. I think it's a lack of support systems. It's a lack of believing that that it's not more pressure. Because if you go about it
Ooh.
the right way, like I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. Yeah, they're
You're
boys.
crazy. Oh my
It's a little
goodness.
crazy. But I have to say, I live a very balanced life. My cell phone's away when I'm with my kids. I stop work at 3:00 2 days a week and 5:00 the other 3 days a week. And I'm done for the night. For work, I do a lot of self-development during those evening hours. But I think there is this belief system that it's going to be more pressure, more stress. And I personally felt more when I was alone than I do today. So I think if it's approached with the right set of tools and resources, it doesn't have to be more pressure to grow your business. But I think there is that fear. And then there's confidence. And I see that all the time.
Mm.
Can I do it? Am I capable? Am I good enough? It's like I'm an avid reader, and if you read Elizabeth Gilbert's recent book on creativity, she jokes, as she does in her fabulous Elizabeth Gilbert way, about how when men apply for a job, they're like, I'm 3% qualified for this job, but I'm going to go for it. And women are like, I'm 103% qualified, and I'm not sure if I'm the right fit. So for whatever reason, we have this idea of perfectionism that we put on ourselves that we can't go for it unless we have it 100% figured out. And I have this conversation with people in my organization pretty much daily. Like, it's okay that we don't have it all figured out, because hitting the go button is so much better than never executing.
So tell me, because you said if you have the right tools and resources, there's not more stress. And I think both men and women want this. How do we have a huge, huge vision and go after it without going, oh my gosh, it's going to be so much more stress and so much more time and so much more everything, because you feel like you're getting it bigger? So what are those tools and resources that you're talking about that will really help people?
I mean, I think some of it is that you have to develop probably your own system. So I can share my own experience. I don't know that I have a cookie cutter answer, because I think it depends on your own skill set. But for me, learning to lead and manage myself first before trying to lead and manage a team has been critical. And I didn't learn how to do that when I first started. I kind of just like jumped in. And then I realized over time that I could be so much more effective with my time and so much more productive if I managed myself first and led myself first. And now it's so much easier for me to lead my team because I know where I'm headed. And if I know where I'm headed and what my goals are and how I want to develop myself, then it's much easier for me to tell other people what I expect of them.
So how do you do that? How do you personally do all that?
So how I personally do that, I have daily, weekly, and quarterly personal development and professional development routines. So I have routines in the morning that set me up for success. I have routines in the evening, which I'm happy to get into detail about. But just as an overview, I spend 2 hours a week pretty much doing like a weekly review of looking back at last week and looking forward to this week. That's non-negotiable time.
That's so impressive, by the way. As a mom of two kids of a 2 and 3-year-old, to take 2 hours to plan your week is just ridiculously impressive.
But it probably saves me 5, because I'm looking forward at that meeting that I have, and I'm realizing there's probably somebody else on my team that's more than capable of taking that meeting if I just prep them for 15 minutes. So that just saved me an hour. So that's what I mean, is that I actually find myself more effective as part of a team, because developing other people is really enjoyable for me. It's very fun for me. I enjoy that piece of leadership a lot. I'm a big believer in servant leadership. So it's really encouraging other people to very high standards, but then saying, how can I help? And we all agree what that looks like. So those expectations are really clear. And then I do a monthly personal offsite where I'm looking at my goals and I'm planning ahead. And then I do a quarterly team offsite. So we did that all day yesterday at a local inn. And we just sat outside. We did yoga for an hour when we first got there. And then we just sat outside with our yoga mats and like hashed it out. Like, what are we doing this quarter? What are our priorities? So if our weeks are 20 hours of our weeks are filled with all of the regular stuff we have to get done, we only have 20 more hours that we can fill with projects. There's 100 hours of projects here. We have to battle this out now, because you can't have too many priorities. So the idea in that is to do less better. So that kind of pre-planning and that kind of structured self-discipline as an entrepreneur, like we don't have a boss to tell us that this is these practices will make us successful. We have to learn that the hard way. And I think that's these are just habits I've developed over time, when I realized that hitting the ground running first thing in the morning wasn't necessarily getting me further along to where I wanted to be.
Okay, so we have so many things to dive into. I do want to do the morning and after and the evening routines in just a second, but it's difficult, at least this is what I hear from everybody and me, to keep yourself on task. So when you know that you have a whole team meeting, it's a little bit different, because you're like, okay, and then we do this and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But when it's just for you, whether it be the 2-hour or the monthly one, how do you keep yourself, that you're going to do it if something comes up? Because you can put it in your calendar all you want. And it can be like, oh, but then I have these things. So that, but then once you're sitting there for 2 hours, you just sit there for 2 hours and like think by yourself. Like that seems a little hard, especially for ADD entrepreneurs.
It is really hard. So part of my morning routine is a 10-minute meditation that just helps me like clear my brain. But it's exceptionally difficult. And I sit down typically, I block 2 hours. I don't always need it, but I find that I'm like, oh, that's right. Like didn't communicate with that person about that thing that we left hanging. And like, oh, that's right. Like that's nowhere on my calendar, but it's probably a higher priority than the thing that is. And you once you kind of get sucked into that, like checking all the appointments you had, and it's even in something as small as I'm a big believer in like appreciation and gratitude, and like I really should probably send that person a note. Like they really, really helped me out. And that's a big part of my weekly review. And it's shocking the response to when you send something like that, because it takes 5 minutes and people like treat you like you're Santa Claus. So, they probably aren't hearing that enough. People aren't hearing that appreciation and that gratitude enough. And it's very motivating. So you could spend 2 hours, trying to get somebody to do something that you need them to do, or you could send them a note telling thank you, and then they're pretty self-motivated. So it's really a matter of, I think, just using your time very effectively. And when I'm at work and I'm hyper focused, like phone away, the whole bit. And then when I'm at home, my laptop goes into the office and my phone's away, unless I'm doing a meditation or I'm doing something that's on my phone that's an app. So, I'm not perfect at these things. I don't think anybody can be, but it's the intention that gets us closer to our goals, not the perfection of it.
1,000 times, yes. So tell me about that morning and evening routine that really works for you, because we talk about routines and it's always amazing to hear what somebody has refined over many years.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of those. I'm an avid reader, and I've read a lot of those articles too. And like, I know, like Anna Wintour, like plays tennis every morning at 5 or something like that. I'm like, I'm sleeping. So
Thank you for saying that. Okay, good. Now you can continue. Otherwise, I'd stop you right there.
My kids and like what's happening with them. Like my youngest was up at 2 last night. So, I did go for a very mediocre jog this morning. I stopped a few times because I was pretty tired, but it was more for my brain than my body. And so I went out at probably wake up, went out at about 6:30, came back, did a 10-minute meditation, showered. Then my husband's off to work. So he, some mornings, some days he has like an hour commute to the state office in Delaware. And some days he's local in Wilmington where we live. So this morning he needed to leave at 7:30. So it kind of cut my morning short. And then I'm with my kids for another hour until either the nanny comes or they go to camp. And so in that time, we make a smoothie together. And there's certain supplements I put in my smoothie I don't put in theirs, and there's some that we share. So we make a whole smoothie together. We've got a whole routine. They get their smoothie. I put the anti-aging stuff in my smoothie. And then, there's also other things in there that really help my brain development.
Like what?
Like flaxseed oil.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're pregnant, so I was, pregnant right in a row, because my kids are 15 months apart. The omega-3s, like that whole brain loss is real. Like your baby actually sucks the omega-3s out of your brain, and it develops.
We're so lucky as
mothers.
I know.
Lovely. You're like, thanks, baby. So, continuing, once I read that, I was like, okay, throw the omega-3s into the smoothie, throw the collagen in, throw the maca powder in, and just use it for energizing. So that either exercise, meditation, smoothie making, somewhere in there. I don't exercise every day, but that kind of routine is definitely present in there. And then at night is a little bit longer. That's a longer routine. I'll usually read for about a half hour. I have a little notebook that sits next to my bed that speaks to, it's just notes I've made from different books over the years. But Mary Kay Ash said that if you want to become a great leader, you have to reflect for 30 minutes a day on the kind of leader that you want to be. So I have all the characteristics written down, and I think like well, was I that kind of leader today? Was I the kind of leader that sees the best in other people? Um, did I ask questions first before responding, or did I just react? So I'm really trying to um, lead myself into the person that I want to become. And then people, when you're the boss, people watch you pretty carefully. It took me a long time to realize that. And it's a modeling. Once you've developed those behaviors, you tend to see them show up in your organization. I'm a person of faith, so I pray and do a devotional. Um, and then I write one line about at least one sentence about something cool that happened with my kids that day so that I can remember.
Aw.
So that's like my evening routine. And it's usually what I'm reading is self-development.
Okay, so how long does that normally take and when does that start, the bedtime routine?
That starts at like 8:30 if my kids go to bed on time, and then it ends around 9:30.
Okay, and then you're just like sleeping by 10?
Typically, yeah.
Okay, great. Because sleep's hugely important,
And up by
especially.
6. Yeah.
And okay, and up by 6.
Yeah, usually around 6. Yeah.
So I loved what you said about the comparing yourself to the leader that you want to be. I haven't actually heard that from somebody doing it consistently every single night. What have you seen as the changes from before you started it to now?
I mean, I think in general, I've grown a lot over the years. Um, I think the things that I realized were not working for me, the mindsets that weren't working for me might be, and this is very common for entrepreneurs, we've got a lot on the line. We financially have a lot at stake. It's very easy to be reactive, or it's very easy to be frustrated when you make a mistake and not see mistakes as opportunities. And there is a momentum in our brains to typically go in a direction that we might not want to, that we see problems as discouragement, not opportunities. And like these, these platitudes are really easy to say. But when you're in that moment of like, oh my gosh, I just saw a sale walk out the door and I've got a lot on the line here, that's really difficult. And the only thing that can really rise above that, I think, is that self management and that self leadership. And so, whereas I might have really reacted poorly to watching a sale walk out the door 7 years ago, now I'd kind of think like, is this person trained right? Are they being held accountable in the right ways? Are they in the right seat? Those are the questions that I tend to go to first, versus just being like, what happened? Are you freaking serious?
An evolutionary process of chilling out. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, chilling out. That's probably true. I would say I'm probably just as intense as I was, but I probably, go about it in a much more effective way.
But that's what's so impressive, that you've trained yourself. So it's not as though the innate sense of doesn't go
Right.
away. It's that you've trained yourself to go, okay, this is the first way I react, instead of letting your animal brain or lizard, whatever you want to call it, sort of
Right.
get in the first seat before you have a chance.
Yeah, when that emotion rises up, it's usually a sign to get into my logical brain, like really try to tap into it. Like, what is the logic behind this situation versus the emotional response? And now that I'm training other entrepreneurs, so we do tons of owner training. I did a big deep dive into personal development today on a webinar with our 9 owners, and these are the things we talk about. Because if somebody had explained these things to me when I first started, I think it would have been transformational. I don't think you can skip experience. They're still going to experience this, but hopefully they'll have more tools than I had when opening my business. And that was my main motivation behind franchising, was to see other people develop as owners within their local community and really accomplish some of the same goals that we've seen to be successful in the Philadelphia area.
Best job ever, helping other people be
Yeah,
successful. Okay,
it's
so
cool.
let's go into the niceness thing, because I know that's sort of the whole thing. Because this is an issue of mine. I want everybody to be happy all the time, and we're
Yeah.
humans and we can't be. So what advice do you have for me on that side of the fence?
So I am built the same way. I'm very lucky that I'm surrounded by people who tell me when I shouldn't own something. And It's a balance, right? So when there's something about ourselves that maybe we found that doesn't work in our favor, the temptation could be like, I'm just going to squash that and I'm going to swing the pendulum in the other direction and I'm going to become completely opposite. I'm going to be a cold bitch. And right, we don't want that, because probably the kindness aspect is what got you to here and what got me to here, is that people want to be in an organization, especially in my industry. I mean, we're hugging babies all day long. Like, of course you want the CEO to be nice. So we don't want to swing the pendulum in the other direction and all of a sudden just not be ourselves. But I think the challenge is, when do you stop owning things? And that's been my challenge, is that I own things really quickly. So I've learned to say, I'm going to own up to here, like really take the time to meditate and think about it. But like, I'm going to own this much, but then I need you to meet me by you. And I wait for them to own their part. So like, I'm cleaning up whatever on my side of the street I own, and then I need you to clean up on your side of the street that you own. So that's part of how I approach it. And I had to do that recently with somebody who had not kept their end of an agreement. And I said, here's the part where I could be supporting you better, but then here's the part where you agreed to it and you're not doing it. And I can't compromise, because that was structured that way for a really good reason. And it wouldn't be fair to everybody else who I've held to this standard. And that actually went really well. So I think we're always trying, particularly as women, trying to figure out where those boundaries are. And but we don't want to stop owning things, right? Because that's what makes you a good leader. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer, but I would also say that I probably didn't. I think that in the past I let the conversation go on too long too. I don't know if you've experienced that as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right. Like this is the 8th time I've talked to you about gossip in the workplace, right?
So that's exactly what I was going to bring up. I give the benefit of the doubt, and then I give the benefit of the doubt, and then and then I'm like, I mean, I get it, and they were going through things, and I make excuses for them on other things.
I do the same thing, or I would let myself feel guilty for my part. Oh well, I did forget to put that in the offer letter,
Yep.
so whatever, something like that.
Yep.
And I think that now looking back, that was so damaging to let that go so far. And so there's things I just don't compromise on anymore. And some of those, and I think that you can always communicate challenges or boundaries in a positive way. So now I might sit with somebody who's continuing to gossip and say, this just isn't something I'm willing to compromise within our culture. So you really have to decide if you can change the way that you approach problems, or if Little Nest is the right place for you. And letting go of worrying about being liked. Because I think at the core, I always worried about whether or not I was going to be liked when they went home at night. And now I think I've been so burned by that worry that now I kind of think, being liked is not the end game. It's really not. Developing other people into great leaders and making sure I've got the right people in the right seats in my organization is so much more important.
I think it sounds like both of those things go together, the knowing what to compromise on and what not to, and the being okay with not being liked. How did you find out what you didn't compromise on? Because thinking and just sitting there going like, I'm not going to compromise on this. Did you do it as things were coming up and going, no, I feel very strongly this way about this specific thing? How did you pick all those uncompromising situations?
I think I probably learned the hard way, where you all of a sudden realize that the person that you were just having continual conversations with about values and culture eventually, just steal from you. And then you're like, oh, so this is how this ends.
Whoops. Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah. So, like and you catch them, and then you have to have that conversation, and you're like, okay, but that started years ago with the conversation where the boundaries were being crossed. So I think now you see those signs earlier. I don't know if there's any way to get around that learning process, maybe just having these conversations and letting people hear them. Um, but I think there's nothing wrong with you if you're going through that learning process, is what I would say. And there's probably nothing wrong with the other person either. It just was never a fit to begin with.
Well, and that's the
And
thing. It always seems like a gray area. And this is with every business owner. They're like, everything seems so gray. If things were black and white, it'd be way easier because you'd be like, yay or nay. But everything's sort of gray-ish until it gets, like you said, to a point where you're like, oh, they stole. Oh, now it's black. Now it's black or white.
right,
So how do
right.
we distinguish when we're in the gray area the best way to take the next action steps?
I think it's self-confidence. I really do. I think that you have to know what you believe in. And, if you join like a franchise organization like we have, you can hook into those values. Like that hard work's been done. It's already out there. Like, well, before we hire people, we put them through a values assessment and
Yep.
like we've done that hard work. So that's the benefit of being part of a larger system. But if you're trying to figure it out for yourself, copying what someone else has done is probably not going to be that authentic. I think you have to decide for yourself what does success look like. But that's why these alone times are so important, because that's when this stuff comes up, is when you're realizing, gosh, this is what I really stand for, and it's probably not being communicated that often. And I've also learned that as you grow an organization, for those of you who have $1 million, companies, and which are typically a larger size company or are growing in that direction, there is a constant downstream momentum against your culture. And you have to, because there's always somebody who's scared. There's always
Yep.
somebody who's worried. There's always somebody who had like a really crappy day, or like, is having trouble in their marriage or whatever. And they're bringing that into work with them. And you cannot be you cannot over communicate your culture,
Hmm.
and you cannot over communicate your values. And I think that proactive communication makes up for a lot of it prevents you from having to be reactive, because if somebody really doesn't jive with it, they will self-select out.
Hmm.
And I've seen that happen. So it kind of saves you the work of having to have those difficult conversations. And I had that conversation with somebody who I was scared to lose, and she self-selected out. And I was like, that sucks, but I'm really glad.
That's happened to me too. And it's funny that you talk so much about values, because way back when I was talking about the nice thing on the last interview, it was in regards to something, and what I did with it was look at I have company values. I also send people through values assessments, and I looked at the company values and what I was going through, and I was like, this doesn't align at all. Like, I didn't even
Right.
look at it beforehand. I was like, oh, I think it's great, we're good, blah blah. And then I looked and I was like, oh, no, no, no. So really having that core set of company values. Before we have to start wrapping up, how would people that are listening right now get that core company values to assess on to know whether things are gray area or not?
That's a good question. I mean, mine evolved over time, so I don't know if that's reasonable for somebody who's probably trying to start their own company. Maybe looking at other brands and what they stand for that resonate with you, and thinking, usually I think the values come from the heart of the founder
Mm-hmm.
and how they're built. And that's, you could probably look outside of yourself for inspiration, but I think ultimately it probably has to come from you. And as I've become more values and culture focused, a lot of the challenges within my company have resolved themselves,
Hmm.
um, of who to hire, what even our team meetings look like. We do a lot of strategic planning work, and getting everybody to own their piece is become much easier than it was years ago. And now I feel like we are um, we're getting into a really good groove, and it's been that way for a while now, where we're kind of a place where we're just scaling, like we've gotten past that startup stage, and it feels really good. And but I don't know how much of the startup stage you can skip. You might stumble through your values, and that might just be the way it goes.
And it gets better, and just knowing that it will get better and better and better as you keep doing it and keep
Yeah,
coming
or
up and
maybe
keep
you
coming
take
up.
a first stab, but you realize like this, it keeps showing up in my organization. It's really important to me, and I need to update our values with it.
Yeah. What are some of your core values? Just like to name two or three.
Yeah, ours are really easy. It's AEIONU, and so it's yeah, so like everyone can
How
like
cute.
remember it,
Yeah.
and it becomes really easy. And so it's authenticity, excellence, integrity, AEIO, open-mindedness, and you just respecting yourself and those around you.
Oh, I love that. And a good way for people to remember it. So that way it isn't something
Yeah.
that you have to look at your sheet and go, shoot, what are the things that I said again?
Yeah, and it's something we
Amazing.
talk about a lot. We
Mm.
usually post about it on our social media page once a week. If before you get to our hiring page, there is that like basically like if this isn't you, don't bother
That's
kind of
amazing.
web page.
Yep.
Um, and people, our economics are strong. I'm really proud of them, but people aren't buying a little nest to just make money. People are buying a little nest because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and they want to be part of something with purpose and meaning. And I'm realizing as we grow that that's one of my most important roles.
That's amazing. I know we have to start wrapping up. And afterwards, I want everybody to check out the website too, because the baby photos on your website are just fantastic.
Oh,
But
thank you.
before we get to that, what's one action listeners can take this week to help move them forward towards their goal of 1 million?
I think really just writing down an affirmation. Like if we're looking at the financial aspect of it, I do affirmations. They might change once or twice a year once I've met a certain financial goal, but they get into not just the amount of money that you want to make, but what you'll do in return for that money.
Huh.
So I want to grow $1 million business, and in return, I will provide the people who are part of my organization with an amazing place to work, or I will provide our customers with the best quality baby photos for the price. Or, you'd have to put it in your own words. Mine is more around franchising, where providing them the very best infrastructure and support possible. But I think you have to have that mindset of like, you don't just get, right? Or if you get, you don't just get to keep, you don't just to get, you're not able to just get and then keep. If you want to obtain wealth and retain it, you have to be prepared for knowing what you're going to give in exchange for it.
Because it's a value. I mean, that's the whole point. It's a value
The whole
exchange.
point.
I usually hear affirmations and it's usually like, I want this much money. Period.
Done.
And so exactly.
Yeah.
So adding that, I haven't heard that, and I think that's amazing and awesome, and I'm writing that down too. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. So where can they find more about you and see really cute baby photos?
Yeah, they can go to littlenestphoto.com. You can click on Own a Studio if you're interested in franchising. If you're just interested in my ramblings, you can go to Laura Novak, LauraNovak.com, and I've got like a leadership blog there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. And if you want more like it, go to eventualmillionaire.com. If you click on the millionaire case studies, you will see over 200 millionaire interviews. I don't want you to get overwhelmed, of course, but I do want you to pick the one that might make the biggest difference in your business today. So what's something you're struggling with, and take a look and see if one of those could specifically help you. Don't just take information for information's sake. I want you to be able to take the information, have it applicable to you right now. You use it, you take action, you see results, you come back and go, Jamie, that was amazing. That's what I want. So go check out eventualmillionaire.com and click on the millionaire case studies. Thanks.